I have written a letter that I sent to a couple fellow community members who sent in some notes to us today and yesterday. If you could just read that, it will guide you a little bit about what our thoughts are, Jennifer's and mine, coming out of the last meeting, and how we'd like to approach tonight's meeting as a board. Why don't we just quickly stand up and introduce yourselves, and then I will read the letter to you.
I'm Matt Stover. I live in Woodstock.
Sherry Sousa, Director of Instructional Sports Services, educator in the district for 24 years.
Jim Half from Killington.
Patty Kuznikas from Pomfret.
Pamela Fraser from Barnard.
Mary Beth Banyos, Superintendent.
Tim Bishop from Reading.
Gary Spale, Principal at the high school and middle school.
Justin Shipman, Bridgewater.
Jessica Stout, Woodstock.
Richard Seaman, Director of Finance and Operations at the SU.
Adam Emily of Reading.
Jennifer Yanatoni, Killington. Melena Agan, Woodstock.
I'm Raphael Adamack. I'm the Director of Instructional Technology. Bryce Samuel from Barnard.
Anyone else? And we got Raina, who's going to be taking notes tonight. So dear community members, never in our wildest dreams did we think this merger would be as difficult and challenging as it has become. Our biggest concern is the amount of distrust and anger that surrounds the conversation. We are listening to all of your thoughts, concerns, and comments to make a decision that will be in the best interest of our children and their educations. As a board, we need to be thoughtful in our decision-making process, but we also need the time to talk and digest the comments from the communities and be allowed the time to talk amongst ourselves to evaluate the options in order to find the best solutions. At this time, we honestly feel that as a board, we have not been given ample time to have those discussions without constant community criticism. As I said at a meeting last week, we need to think differently about our campuses and start thinking about our children and how we are going to best educate them with the assets we have and capitalize on the strengths of the campuses, each campus for the entire district and no longer for only individual towns. We will do our best to present a sustainable plan that can answer 3 cornerstones, providing the best education for our children, financial sustainability for our taxpayers, and short and long-term commitments to our communities. We also acknowledge the importance of having a campus in each community, but at the same time, in order for us to sustain a long-term model, we have to think differently about what the configuration will be without taking away the school. Respectfully yours, Paige Schiller and Jennifer Yanatoni. This is emotional. It's emotional for all of us. You can hear it in my voice. I'm sweating to death. I want to take off my shoes right now. But it's a serious concern for all of us, for community members, for parents, for children, for teachers. And we take our jobs seriously. We have all sat on various individual boards separately, and we now come together as a whole. And my hopes are that as a whole we will work better together and not become divided and weaker, which is what I've kind of witnessed over the last couple of months. And it saddens me greatly, like it has saddened some of you in the audience today, because we as a board are responsible for advocating for our children and their education first and foremost. And we have to find a way to be able to do it with sustainability and financial responsibility to our taxpayers. And that's the hard part about all this, is the financial sustainability to our taxpayers. I don't have all the answers, but we as a board need the time to be able to really discuss the issues at hand. And we have been listening to you. Here are some of the things that we have heard. Frustration because the public doesn't know the board's goals and missions. We need to slow down in our decisions regarding school configurations. Anger over the inequity amongst each school. How do we measure equity within each school when they vary so greatly in student population? How will my kids be affected by larger or smaller classroom configurations? How do we find balance between the needs of a small school versus a larger school? Tight deadlines are dictating our decisions because we don't want to see another year of big tax increases like we did last year. Shrinking schools for short-term savings. Shrinking schools is just the first step in closing the schools. Should the district take on the unexpected expense of remediation that will affect 60 students, or will it affect the entire district? We don't know that answer right now. How will we pay for it? What are the steps that have been taken for remediation? Where is the data regarding remediation? Why didn't we consider more options like magnet schools, charter schools? Are we getting the return on our investment for a $20 million tax bill, which equals $20,000 per child? That's a big question. I would say no. So what do? Do we keep investing that $20 million and get that private school education? Or do we make the cuts that a lot of our taxpayers had expected when we joined ranks? Those are the decisions that we as board have to make. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So with that, we are going to open the floor for public comment. I ask that we not get repetitive in our comments. If you agree with somebody, raise your hand, say here, here, I agree. Let's move on. Each person will have 2 minutes to state their concerns or thoughts. Jennifer will be timing you. We have a very large crowd. Please introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, so we can listen and learn. Thank you.
I'll go first. Go ahead, Julie. I'm Julie Sluka. I'm from Reading. And I want to say I'm really encouraged to hear what you have to say, Paige. That was, except for the but-like configuration, the very end of your letter, I find it encouraging because one of the things I've struggled with the most in listening to this entire process is the lack of vision. The board was being led down a very narrow path of cut, fold into one or two schools, invest here. And honestly, that's not how you poise for growth. And growth is what's ultimately going to bring our taxes down. Bringing students to our district is what's going to bring our taxes down. And how do you do that? You don't do that by minimizing the campuses around you that offer affordable housing, or minimizing the places where you can attract people by telling them what's unique about that education. You don't minimize the way you have been proposing, like the 4 plans that were offered at Reading Elementary School. You market. Woodstock is known for marketing. We have some really great elementary schools, and each of them, they do pretty much the same on the testing. I don't know that testing's really a good measure, but the kids do well in them, and each of them is unique and worth marketing. By marketing and telling parents what makes this school special, you attract the parents who have children who would benefit there. Maybe they'll come to the district, maybe they'll use Reading, maybe they'll use Killington, but you offer them something that grows. 4 or 5 really good small elementary schools could build a vibrant and sustainable population of high school and middle school kids. And instead of going down the narrow path of cut, I would just encourage you to think bigger, build something better, and attract people to our district. And every town is important in that process. And if you thought like that instead of cut the elementary school, tell everyone that Reading's getting smaller and smaller, instead of telling people why Reading is amazing. And I'm sure Killington and Pomfret, West, they all have things that make them worth sustaining. I think if you took that path, you would attract students here, and attracting students is how you're going to bring our tax bills down.
Here. Come on, I know you're here for a reason. Yes.
I just found it interesting. I'm Jean Goldsboro from Reading. Not a parent, just love my town, love my school is my sign. I found it interesting in a recent issue of the Valley News. There's a pretty good piece from Governor Scott, and he's with the upcoming election. He's got all his positions. And one of the things he talks about in the challenges for education now with Act 46 is right at the end of his statement. I just wanted to read that because it really struck me, and it goes in keeping with not only the Act 46 efforts and consolidation, but also this future vision that I think Bully was just speaking to a little bit. And he says we should be thinking about education differently now. It would be interactive learning. It would be something with trades, training, all integrated with our schools, he said. Our schools are outdated at this point. I'm just asking them to be bold, creative, and open-minded because we could truly use this as an economic tool to bring more people to the state. So that's our governor saying that.
Thank you. Here. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm Jenny Hewitt. I live in South Rose, and I've been a teacher at the Pomfret School and the Prosper Valley School for 27 years. One thing that I would implore of the board is to really look at what needs to happen to the Prosper Valley building before any decisions are made. I think it's imperative that we have facts from the engineering study about what needs to be done to the building and a timeline. I do understand that the budget decisions need to be made, but maybe money is put into the budget one way or another, we have, a Plan A budget and a Plan B, but I think making this decision without that critical piece of information seems like a lost step. And as we know, we're trying to attract people to the school. If Pomfret and Bridgewater do not have their own school, how is that going to bode for families moving in? Once we're at Woodstock, I think it's going to be harder to reestablish our identity as Prosper Valley. So I would really encourage figuring out what needs to happen to that building before decisions are made to not put students back in there.
Grade at the Prosper Valley School, and according to the 4 options that you voted upon previously, mine would most likely be a position that would be cut. I stand before you not as a teacher worried about her position, but as a parent to this little guy. My husband and I, we thought carefully about where we were going to go and move and make our home, and we chose Pomfret because we loved the community, the land, and we loved the Prosper Valley School. The Prosper Valley School aligned with our values and our belief in education. So we made the choice to move to Pomfret based on the school. And there's been a lot touted recently about choice. There's been a lot touted recently about equity. And what I would say is that if you take the physical Prosper Valley School and its beautiful campus and its dynamic staff and students, and you put us into Woodstock, you are taking away my choice. I would say, in terms of equity, taking away the physical Prosper Valley School and putting us into Woodstock, you are saying that one size of education fits all. One size does not fit all. Equity is an attempt at fairness, and from where I stand, I would say that closing down schools and taking choice away from families does not feel very equitable. So I'm Allison Green. I teach 5th grade at Prosper Valley, and I came here after teaching in Brooklyn. So I had classes of 27 kids. Like Heather said, it was pretty one size fits all. And I came here because I saw kids outside. I saw kids connected to the place. And I saw these great things happening in small towns. We do all these special things that I know goes on in small towns. And I've seen certain kids need that to succeed. It's not all kids, but I think by taking away that choice for certain kids, you're really losing something special. All kids don't succeed in large classes, and I think by offering parents choice, we need more time than a year to kind of let this settle out.
I'll round out the Prosper Valley since we're Rob Hansen, a teacher at Prosper Valley School. I will not repeat what was so eloquently stated by 3 staff members already. I'd simply say that I understand the tax burden on the community as a village taxpayer. I get that straight away. I did teach out in California for 10 years and had class sizes of 30 and taught 120 students a day, which is pretty typical in a lot of places. I know the differences between that type of education and what we've had at the Prosper Valley School. But I would ask something which is a little different piece here, and that is as we're looking to reduce staff, and I know that is that's going to happen regardless of where the schools are located, that you be really sensitive to the fact that you have folks lower on the seniority list who are phenomenal, not good, but phenomenal teachers. And you need to consider what's down the road in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years for these kids that are in school now. You're making a decision that affects not this year, next year's. You're making a decision that's affecting the future of our communities. And I would ask that you do that, perhaps thinking about attrition. Maybe as someone getting closer to retirement, I shouldn't say that. But looking at ways that naturally, where that may happen, relocations, it happens, and Mary Beth has said this a few times, this happens naturally, and you're looking over that savings over a long term, where those changes are happening, but they're not happening right now.
Hi there, my name is Eden Marceau Piccone. I live in Woodstock. I moved my family here 4 years ago. One of the reasons we chose Woodstock was because it actually had bigger classroom sizes. I had a really hard time thinking about taking my kids and putting them into a classroom with only 4 children and hoping that they got along and worked well within that dynamic. I think these choices that we have to make are terrible. It's heartbreaking. I put myself into everybody's shoes. The problem is we don't have enough children to fill our schools. Like, we're all struggling. Even Woodstock is half full. Like, we don't have the kids. We need to make decisions that are for the benefit and the good of all the children. And you know, you come to this high school. I went to school here 30 years ago. This school is exactly the same. Like, we don't have anything to draw the people here to say, like, why do we want to move to these communities when this is the high school that they go to? So I think when we look at our positions here, that we really need to look at the broad picture and where they're all going to end up here. All of our children are right here in just a few years. And I like, my heart really does go out. Like, I want to make the right decisions, but I can't pay any more in taxes. I'm already like up to here with taxes, and you know, my husband has to leave the state to work, and we need to find ways to bring people to this community. And I think if we start at the top, where like we've got this piece where we're all coming together, maybe like let's build down from there and say what is going to benefit our kids in the absolute long run.
I'm Jacqueline Jameson. I live in Pomfret, and I'm a grandmother of 3 children that go to school in Pomfret and Prosper Valley and now Woodstock. My daughter Liz moved to Pomfret specifically so that her 3 children could go to the school in Pomfret, and bought a house there. And I followed her a year and a half later and bought a house in Pomfret because my grandchildren could go to school in the Pomfret school. There are a lot of ways to save money. You could start at the top and get all the schools in the state to join in on health care or school supplies or things that you can all purchase together. There are many ways to save money. I think you guys need to work on that, not on cutting the schools out and the quality of these schools, but saving money at the top so that these schools can thrive. And yeah, they are a little more expensive or a lot more expensive than the average school in this country, but Vermont is incredible. And to grow up in Vermont, I did, but I went to school in Massachusetts until I was in 6th grade, so I know what that kind of an education is. I was super smart and learned a lot, but I didn't thrive until I moved to Vermont with my mom and became a real person, full of myself and full of confidence, because I lived in this wonderful state with these small schools, and I was a person in this little school. I wasn't one of many. All the teachers knew me, and I was special. And that's what I want for my grandchildren.
My name is Scott Woodward. I'm a resident of Pomfret. Just one request of the board is that I would hope anybody from any other town would ask for the same perspective, is to look at Prosper Valley not as a broken school with a problem, as if it were open today. Because I think you all have to kind of try and look at this through an objective lens and figure out what the criteria is for any school and any asset within the district, and apply that equally to any building that throughout the district. So I don't know if this is the case, but I sometimes worry a little bit that the fact that there is a mold problem is a bit of a handicap for Prosper Valley right now. And so I guess I would just ask that the board view Prosper Valley as if it's open and doesn't have a problem today. And as you develop your criteria, look at it through that lens, and I think that is perhaps the most fair way to look at it.
Seth Westbrook, Pomfret resident, former Pomfret school board member. I'd like to just piggyback on what Scott said. I think the mold situation has been overblown somewhat. I think the messaging and the communication about it has gotten out of control. I think that there needs to be greater clarity on the condition of the building. As it stands right now, I think we need another air quality test. I think people need to know the true condition of the building and have greater clarity about the numbers, the engineering report, and all of that piece of it going on, because a lot of people are confused, a lot of people have wrong information. I've talked to about 10 people that think the building needs to be torn down, and that is absolutely not true. So that's the message that's out there. I think that the district, whomever, needs to take control of the message and put a very, very detailed report out there about what's going on so that people aren't skewed by misinformation, rumor, and fear.
I'm Anna. I live in Reading. I'm not a parent, but like Jean, I love my community and therefore love my school because they're so tightly correlated to one another. And I want to point out how many people have already said that they moved to a small town because of the small community, the small school. That is true for myself and one other non-student parent in this room. We moved to Reading for the school. So if we look at the larger issue, we're supposed to be hard on issues here. If we want to be hard on the issue that we have an aging population and dwindling school sizes, we need to work on the vitality of these small schools because it is what brings people to the area.
I'm Kevin Geiger. I live in Pomfret. I'm the previous Pomfret School District moderator. And so usually I don't get to say anything, I just get to coordinate. Tonight I'm going to give my views for a little bit. And I don't envy your position at all. You're going to have tough decisions to make. My goal is always have the best information to make the best decision possible. I don't think we currently have that in Pomfret, and that we don't know what the air is right now. As Seth has said, we don't have an actual professional outside engineering firm to tell us what the actual condition is of the perimeter drains, for example, and stuff. I understand you have a small bit of money. I would urge you to go forth and get as much information as you can prior to freeze up about the actual condition in the ground of that building so that you go into the winter with the best information you have to make the best decision, which I trust you will. Thank you.
I already spoke, but just I wanted to add that I would be remiss if having all of these people from different communities if I didn't mention how grateful we are to the Woodstock community for accepting Prosper Valley into their building on such short terms and being so gracious. And I don't want anyone to misconstrue that any of our comments tonight are in any way belittling Woodstock Elementary. It is an absolutely amazing school with a lot of great things. I think the point that I'm hearing from a lot of people is that it is a choice that works really well for some people, and it's a choice that others have sought to make a different choice. If that wasn't worded very well, but I think you know what I'm saying. So we are so grateful for that space and to be able to get back to educating our students. But I do want to point out that it's not an ideal situation. So as you're looking at models for next year, that's a real concern for me. We are making it do. It is working really well, but it is not an ideal situation.
I'd actually like to make a really quick point about that. My daughter was really excited when she was going to get to see some of her Pomfret friends, and I feel like we are a segregated school at Woodstock right now, and I think we need to, I can understand we want to keep the teachers and keep some uniformity, but I really feel like we need to make some effort to bring our kids together, at least let them play on the recess, have some lunch together. Like, it's strange that kids are in the building and they don't even, like, they know their friends are there and they never get to see them. It's strange, and I think it almost, like, segregates all of us. Like, bring our kids together. Let's, let them, find a way. And then when we start to have these conversations, and it, like, the good from our kids pours out into everybody else.
So to piggyback on that, I've heard a lot of what's great for the parents.
Where are you, Bill?
Oh, I'm sorry, Bill Overbay from Pomfret. I've heard what's great for the parents, what's great potentially for the educators. I haven't heard what's great for the kids other than a small school. I think we're at a crossroads right now where as a district, we can look and say, these are the different assets we have. How can they best be used to benefit the students, which I think should be the overarching goal. And I take that to say, you've got a school up the road that has a great playground for really small kids. I think if you ask a 6th grader to go play football at the Woodstock Elementary School, they end up playing it on cement. You've got a school 2 miles up the road that's got a soccer field attached to it. And can we do something different with the resources we have to provide not only a great books education, but as someone said, a great environmental education, a great exposure to what's around them, whether that be sugaring, using an observatory. I don't know how many people here went to school with an observatory. I didn't. I think that's a phenomenal asset. I think for the kids, like I said, to have the playground facilities at the Woodstock Elementary School at the smaller grades is great, but I don't think a 5th grader wants to dig in a sandbox on metal toys. They want to play a game, they want to go skate on an ice rink during the winter. So I would urge the board, the community, to look at this from the aspect of what's great for the student and actually put them first. Thank you.
Commenting on that, I think what the problem here is we feel blindsided. We didn't expect this. It went from mold to we're just changing everything. And what you said sounds great, but we don't have time to even think about this. This has been thrust on us. And this is a 3, 4, 5-year plan, not this is what we're doing right now. And we were told that we would have at least 3 years in our Pomfret school. And now, because there's mold, which nobody's addressed, told us about, other schools have mold in the state and they went back in their schools. We've all encountered mold in our lives, and we know there are various kinds of mold and types of mold and how you treat it, and it's all treatable. And I'm not seeing any treating or updates on what's being done. I feel like we've been pushed in the back, and this is good enough for us for now. And how can we join with the Woodstock students, because we were told we're going back to the school? So we just don't know what's going on, and we feel like no one's considering us or keeping us in the loop or giving us a voice in it.
Pomfret School, and I've lived in Pomfret for a long time. And I've searched up 2 articles I think would be important for anybody interested in budgets for elementary schools in Vermont, or for schools in Vermont. And I'll tell you those, but I do want to say first that I don't know how you can have workshop sessions without an engineer's report. I mean, you don't have all the information you need to make good choices. So I'd be really careful about that because there is no report. And I don't know, Meredith, whether there's...
It's coming. I promised you that you would get detailed information, so you'll get it tonight.
Have you hired an engineer?
We'll go over all that after this.
But anyway, the 2 articles, it took me a while to get these, but they're both from the Vermont Vigor, and one is by David Moats, and I'll get you the title. I'm going to get you the title. The Politics of Education Financing is the first one, and the second one is, by Mark Tucker, and it is called "It Is Not Education That Makes Education Costs So High." And I really encourage you, and I have this information if anybody wants it, but I encourage you to read these articles. I think they're important.
Sherry Macri from Reading, and I just wanted to piggyback off of the comment about being blindsided. Sherry Macri from Reading. Just piggybacking off of the comment about being blindsided, that's an experience that I think we can share in Reading. And I think this also speaks to your letter, which I also appreciate, when these plans and decisions are just sort of pushed through really quickly in this very new relationship that we're all in together, it feels like a hidden agenda. As opposed to if you were to maybe tell us what the plan is in lots of detail, whether it has to do with mold and Pomfret or campus configuration in Reading or Pomfret. Give us the plan, explain to us what are the educational benefits to Pomfret, Bridgewater, Woodstock, Reading, what are the fiscal advantages to all of those towns, and let's have some dialogue about it. That feels more transparent. Whereas when it's pushed through really, really quickly, it does create a culture of mistrust. People feel blindsided. It feels like there's hidden meetings and decisions that are happening without people knowing, and decisions that affect all of us and all of our kids. And so I think it would really help to, which is why I appreciate you, Larry, to just take a step back and talk through all of the ways you think that all of our students and taxpayers are going to benefit.
I'll say one thing to add to that. I'm going to look again. Is that I think that's what's missed from all of these, from the Act 46 meetings right on through, as individual communities, there's been a lot of me politics. Reading's guilty of that, but honestly, Reading has experienced nothing but cuts and attacks from the first day. We were promised things that didn't seem to be true, and we were told they weren't promises. There was a lot of cross-finger pointing. But I think the bigger issue is most of you as board members cannot appreciate why we are fighting so hard for Reading. And we probably don't truly appreciate why they're fighting so hard for Pomfret. Because one of the things as the board I've never seen you do is come to us and say, as parents, why is your school special? What works for your child? What doesn't work for your child? Because I could tell you a lot of things. Reading, for years, recently in my experience, was kind of Waldorfy. And if it got marketed that way, you would attract people there because there are a lot of kids who really benefit from the small community approach, from the way every child is really cared for, from the way people are taught to be citizens in that school. the kids teach each other to read. They help the ones who are struggling. They build groups of children together. And if you were marketing that, if you were telling parents this is why Reading is good, this is the type of school your child might do better in, and if you told me that something about Pomfret or West would be better for my child, I might understand more. But as a board, I've never seen that work done. All I have heard from the board is you are getting cut, you're getting cut, your 2, 3, and 4th graders are going into one classroom, and we'll give the pre-K teacher a 4-day math class, and she will teach the 2nd graders math, because one teacher, it turns out, can't teach everything to 2, 3, and 4. As a parent, you not only hurt my child's education, and it is inequitable, but you stole what was so special from that school because you didn't understand it. And I don't understand Pomfret. I probably don't understand West. Killington I haven't heard from tonight, but they probably have a lot to offer too. And as a district, if we understood where those assets were and we capitalized on them, we would be better off in 5 to 10 years. But that's not how the discussions have gone in the last decade. In the last decade, it has been infighting since before 46 required us to merge. And I'm saying as a community, which is now multiple towns as one district, we need to think bigger and really appreciate all of the assets, not target some of them. We are all assets, and we can all build a much better population of like middle and high schoolers if we worked collaboratively. And that is something I haven't seen the board do because the money has been the focus, or the student to staff ratio has been the focus. That's not how you get equitable education. You get equitable education by offering multiple forms of education so children get what they need. And you tell the parents where those resources are, so that the parents can choose the right school in the district, and then you bus them there. You don't just bus kids to West, you bus kids to Reading, or Killington, or Pomfret. You build a solid base in the elementary schools, and you get better middle school and high school students. And that's where the discussion should go for the board, in my opinion. Thank you.
I'm a Woodstock resident. I think most of the people on this board have children in the schools. I feel like we need to recognize how difficult the situation is. I feel a lot of anger towards them, and I feel it's unfair. They're making a very difficult decision on behalf of our children. And I don't feel like it's helpful to criticize them personally for not. We can come to board meetings. We can come here every month and hear what they have to say. It's not a secret if you come to the meetings. It's just when something like this comes up, all of a sudden it feels threatening and it brings people out in numbers. I haven't ever seen this many people out at the meeting. Like, I try to make the meetings or watch them on the community TV, but I feel like they're doing a very difficult job. They're not trying to, they have a tough decision to make, and it doesn't help to have like such angry comments. What are they going to do?
I'm not angry at you. I've been on a board. My husband did it for years. I know that this is hard. I'm not angry at you. What you hear is not anger, it's advocacy, because I'm really passionate about the schools, all of them, and the education. I appreciate how hard this is. This is advocacy, not anger. I don't dislike any of you. I don't even know most of you. What I would say, though, is you haven't been asking the right questions, and I know how hard it is having been on the school board. You often just come to the meetings and you rubber stamp whatever the administration shows you. What I'm asking this board to do is think bigger and be bigger and lead the administration instead of in the opposite. Right now, the administration is telling them cut because of the pressures they're under, and I get that. I get that. But if you really want to build, you can't just look at cut, and I appreciate what you're doing, but I'm advocating right now because this is really important for all of our kids, and that's what I wanted to say. I am not angry, I'm advocating.
move on. Thank you, everybody, for your input. Thank you for your comments. We greatly appreciate it. Jennifer, after the last meeting, felt like we didn't have adequate time as a board to talk more extensively about the decisions that were at hand. My letter and Jennifer's letter shows that input of how we came away from that meeting. Tonight, our goal is to talk about trying to meet 3 cornerstones in the progress of how we are going to proceed with the district. We are also going to update you because there was a request to update you with what the financial ramifications were for each choice from the last meeting, and we think it's important that we answer those questions from a financial standpoint so that you are aware of what those effects are to you as taxpayers. But we also felt that those choices weren't necessarily the final answer to vote on in November, that we needed to look even deeper at our campuses, our assets, and what the pros and cons of each of those campuses offer to us. There are going to be different configurations at these campuses. I'm going to be straightforward with you. However, our goal, keeping that in mind, is to be able to make a long-term commitment to those campuses and to also offer more equity in the level of education within those configurations. We also have to look at not only advocating for our children and the best education we can provide for them, but we also have to look at our financial sustainability as well as our commitment to all of you within these communities so that we're not sitting here year after year after year reconfiguring and moving kids over and over and over, because that's also not healthy for them. So tonight we will be going over some of the questions that you have regarding Prosper Valley and where we are on Prosper Valley. We will be going over the Jennifer and Richard will be reviewing the financials of the first 4 options that we considered last week. And then we will start discussing kind of a different way of looking at these campuses and their assets and the configurations within these schools that we think will hopefully highlight them and hopefully make some changes for the better of our kids and their outcomes. But we do need time, and we've asked you that tonight, for us to really have these hard discussions between the board members. We welcome you to listen in on the conversations if you want, but I will be very honest, we've got to have these conversations. If we don't start having them, we're going to keep being here month after month after month, and we're not going to get anywhere. And so I just ask you to give us that opportunity tonight to really be able to dive deep, to really explore. Jennifer and I have worked with Richard and Sherry and Raph and Mary Beth and Garen and the other administrators to come up with a different idea based on our last meeting's results, as well as the comments that started coming in as that discussion progressed over the last couple weeks. So we will have a starting point for the conversation tonight for our board members and other things that may evolve from it. I don't know, because we put together a plan for a starting point of the conversation tonight that is not based on actually 1, 2, 3, or 4 from the last month. So I'm going to give Richard and Jennifer the floor to discuss how the finances related to those options from last month's meeting.
So, as I said before, my name is Jennifer Yanantoni. I'm from Killington, and I chair the Finance Committee for the Act 46 Board. And we're gonna walk through exactly what the ramifications are of different scenarios that may play out with elementary campus configuration. But I want to sort of walk it back for those of you who aren't on finance, so that you can really understand the time constraints we're working under. March, we have our town meeting vote, so we ask our taxpayers to vote on our budget. Walk that back. Our budget has to be to all the towns, to be warned, to be in the town bulletin the 3rd to 4th week in January, depending on the town. That means the first week in January, we need to vote as a unified board on our budget. That means we have to bring a budget for the board to look at the first week in December. It is now November 5th. So, walking back, we have been, and we have monthly finance committee meetings where we're always looking at, okay, what are our contractual obligations? How's our spending coming along? What investments do we want to make this next year? Balancing all these so that we're not doing everything last minute in November. Richard will go through things with you, but something I really want you to keep in mind as we talk about what these potential reconfigurations will cost or are going to save. I want you to remember, seems like I'm always saying the same kind of thing. Remember, we have contractual obligations. Health insurance. We know staff and teacher health insurance is going up 11.8% this year. That means even though we renegotiated last year and teachers are now paying 15%, we know that we're going to have 11.8% increase. We do not yet have a contract, but we are making plans. We have to plan out what the increase to teacher and staff is going to be, and we think the staff is somewhere around 2.5, the teacher around 3.5. If you just take into account the health insurance increases and the raises to teachers and staff, we have $685,000 additional. That's in addition to what if we just level fund this budget, if we make no changes. To tell you what that means tax rate wise, now remember, we're in year 2 of our consolidation where we get the bonus. We're now going to be at 6 cents this year incentive. Remember, there was 8, 6, 4, 2.
Jennifer?
Yes.
We're going to lose 2 cents. That's reality. We're not going to get 6 cents.
Yes, we're going to lose 2 cents from last year. Yeah.
We had 8 cents. We're losing 2
We're
cents.
losing 2. We're going to 6-cent incentive. So even if we, I'm just sorry, I just got updated, so I wanted to make sure I have the right. Even if we, with that additional, is it correct that it would be 13 cents non-homestead and 10 cents increase homestead? So that's if we do nothing, just with those 2 contractual obligations, and that means no investments in the middle and high school, no investments in any of the elementary schools. That's what we're facing. So we are going to see a 13 cents non-homestead and 10 cent homestead increase if we make no changes. So understand that those are the parameters in which we are talking about this. We have to make some decisions, and certainly we need to be very informed about what all of this costs going forward. Okay. Now Richard's going to price out some things for us, right?
Yes, actually, we spent a little time on Prosper Valley, if that's okay. How do I make this work? How do I take this forward? The Prosper Valley School. My name's Richard Seaman. I'm the Director of Finance and Operations at the SU. I've been here now for 4 years. I do not live in Vermont. I actually live in New Hampshire, so I'm looking at an objective perspective of what the meaning of this is. I truly am an objective perspective on this. My background prior to this is I worked in banking for 25 years, and one of the areas I was responsible for was all of the buildings and grounds and branches, et cetera, within the banking industry. So I have a fair amount of background on it that I bring to it. Joe, who we've heard from, Joe Rigoli, who joined us in July, has also been spending an enormous amount of time as we're trying to understand the issue and just what's gone on over at Prosper Valley. So what I'd like to do tonight is spend a little time just going through the background. And I've broken every rule there is on a PowerPoint, because I've written full sentences and everything else with an understanding this will be out on the internet and you can take the time to read down through. But just a little bit of background, and I don't know if you see it, but the building was constructed in 1992. And the first issue related to mitigation of water took place in 1994. And what was happening is there was excess moisture that was coming up through the slab in the multi-purpose room, the large room when you go in, right as you go into school, right in front of you there. And the floor was not adhering. The carpeting people were saying, we can't get the floor to adhere, we have an issue. What they ended up doing was opening up a 10 by 15 foot piece of the slab and looking in there to find out what has gone on. Was there something wrong in the way that the foundation was put together? Something wrong in the soils? Was there a lack of a vapor barrier? And we've said this around here, there was no vapor barrier in Prosper Valley. Well, there is a vapor barrier in Prosper Valley. And it is thin, and the vapor barrier is supposed to keep the water from coming up and going through and then getting up into the slab. And when it gets into the slab, it gets up out into the air. They tested the subsurface, they worked with engineers, they worked with the architect, they worked with the contractor at the time. And what was most problematic, and they worked with a number of people from Pomfret who were also in the engineering area, was most problematic is the tests were inconclusive, both on the amount of moisture that was there and also where did it come from. There's still an ongoing question of we know we have moisture, but how is it getting through a plastic vapor barrier and up into the slab and up into the building? And none of the tests have ever shown exactly how that's going on, but it has been going on since when the building was first built, and it continues to go on right now. The recommendation back at that time was they basically gave three different choices. They said choice number one is tear up the whole slab that's in the multi-purpose room, dig up all the soil underneath, repack the soil, put down a new vapor barrier, put down a new slab, and try to solve the problem that way. They also said, well, what you can do is you can do that just in this small 10 by 15 foot area. And then the other one was put in a temporary slab in this little 10 by 15 foot area and continue to monitor and try and figure out whether this is something that's going to be ongoing. Clearly, option number one was too expensive. You have a building that's already up to cut out the slab, tear it up, dig it out, and then put another one in. So what the board decided to do, and rightfully so, was they did this just in that 10 by 15 foot area. They put down a flooring sealant on the whole multi-purpose room and put the floor back down. Even following that, there was a period of time when the floor was bubbling, so weights were put down on the floor to help the adhesive to cure. And it did cure. So the floor is actually stuck to the slab, which was what the intent was at that time, only on the multi-purpose room. Since 1994, we really don't have any written information on the status as it relates to water or moisture or anything related to that. What we know is two projects have been done recently over at Prosper Valley to improve the building. One of them was a kitchen was constructed, and in order to do the kitchen, a sealant was put down on the floor because you need to be able to keep the floor clean. So an epoxy sealer was put down on the floor in the kitchen. The other big project, which was just completed, I think last year is what it was replacing all the flooring in the front entryway, which was a wooden flooring, and it was coming up. So after an enormous amount of work by the Prosper Valley Board in this case, they came to the conclusion, we'll put down a ceramic tile and proper adhesives and get it set in there, and if you haven't been there, it looks fantastic. Those were both done. Now, the issue is the flooring in the kitchen, which was supposed to keep all the moisture out and make it easy to clean, that flooring is actually bubbling. And we actually have one of the previous chefs who's in our district who was there and has pointed out that floor is bubbling because there's pressure coming up from underneath, from water underneath. What we also know is with these tiles we have in the front, when it gets moist, when there's rain, we have actually water or moisture running through the grout lines on those tiles. And we saw that this summer. That's not a bad thing inherently, but we know that that's there. Seth?
Do you know for sure that that's seeping and not moisture in the air that's condensing on the colder surface?
We do not. We don't know if it's coming up from the bottom. We don't know if it's condensing because of excessively moist days. What we know is on a rainy day or on certain, we see the moisture, whether it's raining, whether it's high humidity or low, but we don't have the specific test to say, is that coming from under or is that just because it's condensing on a cold floor? Here's what went on this summer, and I know there's been a lot of concern and a certain amount of criticism of how come this took place. So school ended in July. The school was closed. We had a maintenance worker that was there periodically through the summer. We had artistry that was using the building for some of their summer programs. And on July 26th, we were contacted by artistry that there's mold growing on the surfaces of the multi-purpose room, both the floors and the walls. At that time, Joe had been on for not very long, heads over there. The same day we began trying to air out the building. Fans, windows open, doors open, fans running in every fan, every dehumidifier that we had in the building to try and address this. We also brought in and had solutions that were to take care of the mold issue solely. And again, we don't believe this is a mold issue. We believe this is a moisture issue. Mold happens because you've got a certain amount of moisture and then you have a certain amount of carbon for it to grow on. But we've got a moisture issue. So we spent a lot of time in there trying to get it cleaned up. We also found several places outside of the multi-purpose room where mold was growing, on the carpet, on some of the countertops, etc. So it wasn't just in the multi-purpose room, it was throughout the building. We came to the mud board in September and asked for $25,000 or approval to spend $25,000 for engineers to solve this problem. We thought at that time we had a moisture issue. If you dehumidify the building, if you get the moisture out of the building, we've solved our problem. At that time also, we didn't know about anything that had gone on back in the 90s. Post that meeting, the new janitor, the new custodian at Prosper Valley was hunting through some boxes up in the attic on the back side and found a big box of notebooks. And in those notebooks was a detailed discussion of everything that had taken place with the moisture issue back in 1992, 93, and 94. Which for me certainly was the first time I heard it. For Joe was the first time. I know Rob, thank you very much, had said, geez, they took the floor up at some time. I don't know why, but you had helped us on that piece. But we found out that what we were talking about here wasn't a dehumidification issue any longer. There was something systemic in the building that was causing moisture to come out of the ground into the building, and it had been going on for many years. And the detail in these notebooks is significant. It's the engineering studies, it's all of the analysis, it's all of the measures of relative humidity, etc., are all included in here. So what happened is our project went from being an engineering study, and an engineering study that we would have hired an HVAC engineer to design an HVAC or a dehumidification system, size it correctly so that it gets the moisture out of the building, and boom, we're solved. But now we don't know how much moisture is coming in. And our engineer said that to us, how big do we need to make this system? How much moisture is coming in? We need to do tests to understand this. So the reason that we are struggling to a degree with the engineering study is we started out with an engineer for HVAC. And what we're finding is we have HVAC, we have a water and a water pressure questions. We have getting water away from the building. We have the ability of the soil to perk and get water so it just moves away. It became a bigger project. But the approach that's been taken is we're still looking at how do we keep the water from coming in, and any water that comes in, how do we get it out of the building? And the recommendation is going to go down that direction. Relative humidity, just so you understand, and throw some statistics, is it needs to be below 50% in order to inhibit the growth of mold. So that's our bogey. We need to get the moisture continually below the 50% level. What we also did going into the year is we increased the air circulation. We brought in a group who washed down all the surfaces in the building. And if you had been there, I mean, they came in full, really almost hazard suits. And they washed the whole building down, and it was our expectation that get the air moving, clean the building up, we're going to be fine. Following that, we did tests on the air quality. So the air quality tests were done on the 23rd. School, I think, opened on the 27th. What is allowable for mold? And this is not the infamous black mold or something else. This is actually a mold, and I think someone said this is a mold we all live with. It's in the environment, we have it, it's there. You're allowed to have an acceptable level 400 to 600 parts per million, a notable level 600 to 800 parts per million, and if it's above 800, it's not acceptable. And we did testing in multiple different places. So outdoors, it was at 200. It was within the acceptable range. So we at least know what our base was. Multi-purpose room was at 1,700, and that's after wiping down and washing down all of the surfaces in there and having an outside group come in. The library 33.4, the North Wing Cubbies, I think that's how you spell Cubbies, but the North Wing Cubbies, 64,700 parts per million. Classroom number 4, 59,000. Classroom 1,400, 1,000. Classroom 13, 17,000. These are not a matter of it's almost okay. These numbers are what caused the decision that said, we don't feel comfortable putting our kids in there. We need to figure out how to inhibit mold being and growing in the building. These are big numbers. So, in the course of the conversations and where we're going with the idea that, yes ma'am?
I have a question. The school has been here since 1992.
Yes.
We've had the issue since pretty much the start of the school.
Yes.
We've been doing the school. How have they been maintaining the school with the mold or the humidity that we've gone for this long, except for the last 2 years, and all of a sudden it's bad?
Let's go back on. You know what I'm saying? Yes, it's been there since 1994. It's likely been the same condition since 1994. But your last statement was it was okay, or how come it's only?
No. What did they do?
We don't know what the conditions were during those 25 years. If you had done testing in the 25 years, we may have had similar results. We don't know the answer, and there's no way to get it. The only thing we have now is we do have testing because we were requested by the community, the teachers, the parents. What is it? Is it safe to be in there? So all we really have to work with is now. I just have nothing to speak to what was it in between.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah, and again, it's a great question,
Yeah.
but for which we just don't have any answers on now.
Richard, if I can just quickly point out, the building opened in 1991.
Okay, what I see for occupancy of the occupancy of the certificate of occupancy was 1992, but 1992, 1991.
Right. Are you sure?
Yeah.
It's 91.
Okay. That's fine. The recommendation that we put together is basically get the water away from the building, number one. Number two, try and inhibit it or keep it from coming up through the slab. Number three, what does come up from the slab or humidity, get it out of the building through a dehumidification process. This is going to require some work and some things in order to get sealants down, etc. Number four is do a final clean of the building. And then really the next step is an ongoing testing so that we're comfortable for a period of time that we've knocked this one. The humidity's down and the mold is under control. The pieces specifically, we know the exterior foundation drains. So there are many who can speak much more wisely about this than I do, but basically there are drains around the foundation, and when water gets down there, it's supposed to go in the drains, and it takes it away. The drains around the Prosper Valley School have failed. The water is not flowing out of those. Now these are roughly 4 feet down, right up against the foundation. So the recommendation, first one is fix the drains, while at the same time the foundation has not been waterproofed to keep water from hitting the slab and going inside of it. Waterproof the foundation, fix the drains, regrade so that the water coming off the roofs there is directed away from the building. You know, pretty common sense. Second piece is we're trying to get real data, so we've installed or will be installing relative humidity meters. Little meters about yay big, they go about 2 inches down inside of the slab. We can digitally read them to tell us what the humidity is in the slab. It's not the end all, but at least it starts to get us out of subjectivity and into objectivity as far as measuring what's going on there. 3, seal the concrete slab, and the recommendation we have here from the people we spoke with, where we can get a warranty on work and on results, is to seal the slab in the whole building. Now, we're not talking the multi-purpose room as of right now. We're not talking the front entryway where the new tiles went down. So the remainder of the building, which is about 13,000 square feet, where you pull up everything that's on that floor, take it all the way out to the walls and all throughout the building, and put this sealer down throughout the building to try and either inhibit or to keep moisture from coming up through. Now again, we don't know why the moisture's there, but we know it is there, so how do we at least keep it or minimize it coming into the building? Next step is to conclude the engineering study on the HVAC and on the dehumidification, sizing it properly so that we can get the moisture out of the air. We then go back in and we will have to build out the classrooms because we will have taken everything out of the classrooms, so the countertops, the sinks, this kind, in order to expose the floor. So rebuild up the classrooms consistent with how we're using the building. Do a final clean, and these mold cleans are not inexpensive. It's roughly a $40,000 price tag to have them come in and wipe down the whole building. Seems rather extreme, but that's what it is. And then the testing is pretty easy. That's $600 a test. That's the approach, and it totals up to about $450,000.
Richard, why would you not put the epoxy liquid sealant on the multi-purpose room if you're seeing some moisture on those tiles?
And that is available for us. In order to do that, we would need then to also strip off all the flooring on the multi-purpose room, which is currently adhering quite well. But we would have to strip that up and do the same approach. The feeling right now is, because it appears to be adhering, that we might not have to do it there. I think much wiser people than I could say, you really ought to do it there. So, but that could be added on, 5,000 square feet at the cost that we would have on this. Did you have something, Seth?
I just wanted to say that I think number one makes a lot of sense. I looked through that binder of stuff and all the drawings with Joe in the building when it was found.
Yeah.
And part of the engineer's report after the initial findings they went through was that the sub-slab material may be contributing to wicking moisture because it's not the 1.5 inch crushed fill that was specified. It was sand, 12 inches of sand. You've got perimeter stem walls that are not waterproof, concrete porous. Water sitting there, the foundation drains failed. Water, porous. I think there's a little bit of short circuiting potentially happening of the vapor barrier that's installed underneath the building.
And again, the reason we're looking at get the water away and then seal it is once you don't have it, then you can also address if there's any other reason why the water's coming up. My assumption was that the drains worked in '92 when they built it, and they still had pressure, there's a term for it.
Hydrostatic pressure.
Thank you, hydrostatic pressure pushing up. So we're going to correct the drain and try and address
Richard, how do you know there's hydrostatic pressure?
Pardon me?
How do you know there's hydrostatic pressure? That's sort of rare, actually.
Well, everything about what we have here right now is rare, is that we seem to have moisture that's coming up through the slab. We don't know if it's coming from pressure or if it's coming from core materials that's wicking it into and then up. So we're just trying to address, we know there's moisture, how do you keep it out of the building?
Jim?
Yeah. Listen, folks, I have a meeting elsewhere in Killington. I came here tonight just to really hear you folks here. I didn't get filled in the rest of this. I did not want to miss hearing what you folks had said tonight, so I am not being rude getting up and leaving, okay? But I'm sorry, this was a special meeting and I have a Killington select.
Any other board members have any questions about this recommended remediation?
I don't want to hold you up too long, but I guess my question is a little related to these two scenarios of like the wicking versus the pressure. Because if we're talking about epoxying the floor, but you're not doing anything with the interior walls, you're leaving. I'm assuming that would solve like a wicking issue. And I'm no engineer, but if there's actually pressure, that's putting moisture up, and you have these certain spots that aren't actually sealed. I would assume that's where the moisture would go.
And that is part of still having a dehumidification in there. We do expect that underneath the floors, because you're going to seal all of the floor, if any moisture comes in, it's set up such that it lets it back into the air, and then the dehumidifier has the ability to pull it back out. We're not going to solve all the moisture in there. We're going to have moisture, now we need to get it out.
Richard, not a surprise question, one I asked you this afternoon. Is why not in sequence undertake step one? You go back a slide.
Oh, I didn't know I went forward. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Yeah. Why not step one? The ground's still not frozen. Before you get into the cost of ripping everything back to the walls and doing the epoxy seal, if in fact the issue is just the volume of water, it's a very large roof, all that water drains right off the building to the foundation. Why not in fact try one first and then see what that does in terms of humidity and wicking before having to commit to well over $200,000 additional cost? Well, maybe the HVAC may be still required, but I guess the build out plus the sealant expense.
And Bob, it's good thinking, and maybe that's solid. What I was recommending here was what I thought. It's not high. We've had a lot smarter people in the room. What we're looking at might be the highest opportunity. So we hit it once. We don't have to have our kids come in, have an issue arise, and have to take the kids out. So that's what we have. If the board decides to go through a part of this or do it in a serial way, that's certainly an option. We'll just have to figure out what gives us the highest probability of success. And again, the $450,000 number is a big number. But if we were to replace this building would be a $5 to $6 million building, I think. So, I mean, it's a big number, but as compared to the quality of the building, the quality of the site all the way through, it's an investment, but it's not one that you would look at and say that it is a huge investment. It's an important investment. I'm sorry, you had a question?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think we should do the foundation drains, put in the humidity testers and see what the results are. I mean, that's something that can be done very quickly and get our kids back in there without, if everybody's worried about the finances, why don't we do what makes the most sense? I mean, what I would do in my own home would be the first two things. I would clean and test. I would not go through all those steps without knowing the results of the first two things.
And again, from just to give an idea of how it was built up, bringing the kids back in, if we then have an issue, so let's say the kids came back in February and in May there was another issue because we hadn't quite solved it, then we have to move the kids back out again. So what I'm proposing on here is how do we try and bring the maximum amount of success so as to minimize the in and out. I'm not saying it's right, I'm just giving an idea of what the logic is behind the multi-step project. And now it's wider.
I have 3 kids in Prosper Valley,
Yep.
and getting them into school from February to March is better than what we're doing right now.
Fair.
So is this the recommendation to the board from the, I'm just trying to understand what has been presented.
This is an update from the board on what the state of affairs is with the Prosper Valley School, so that when we look at the option that will be presented, we can consider these things
That's the
in our
cost.
conversation.
So I guess what I'm just trying to understand is, when will the board be forced to decide on, is this the menu or not? I'm trying to decide how final is this recommendation.
So in November, we will be discussing, we will be voting on what our decision is as a board moving forward for short-term and long-term.
And it will include this as a part of that discussion, which will affect how we build the fiscal 20.
Good question, St. John. There's no question that you have a water table problem, and water seeks its own level. So where is the water table around the building? And you may have to put perimeter drains down 10, 12, 15 feet with pumps that they use in septic systems to pump sewage up the hill. You've got to take the water pressure thing away. If you go down only 4 feet, the water table and pressure is going to go underneath that and come right back up underneath your slab. I live in an old farmhouse, and boy, I can tell you in the springtime, the water almost comes right up to my living room.
Yes, ma'am.
Just a question. You had stated earlier that you had requested $25,000 from the board to hire an engineer. Was that, you never hired the engineer?
We hired the HVAC engineer,
The HVAC engineer.
but the HVAC engineer can't conclude his study till he gets an idea of how much he's trying to.
These recommendations.
These recommendations came from talking with floor covering people, with those that address water coming up through slabs, with talking with local architects, with talking with people who are knowledgeable and say these are potential solutions.
So it seems to me that a prudent first step might be to hire a civil engineer to put together, to look at all of this and put together a recommendation.
And we can certainly go that
Because
direction.
I'm just thinking, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking perhaps we want a second opinion on steps 1 through 7. Perhaps these aren't even the steps that we should be considering. It could be a completely different set of steps that someone with a civil engineering background might recommend.
Yes.
You mentioned that the system failed. Is it a failure? And do you know where the failure took place, or is it an inadequate system?
On the drains.
Foundation draining, and the roof draining, and all of that, and where does it go?
We haven't dug them out. What we know is water is not running through them.
And you
we
know
also know
why?
there's been shifting in the pipes that are in there. So I don't know if it was improper installation or just how it was done. But we know it has indeed failed. They're filled with particulates.
So it was, do you have a schematic so you know exactly what you're looking at?
Pardon me?
Do you have a schematic so you know exactly what you're looking at?
We have as-built drawings.
Yeah.
Yes.
So can I just interrupt for a second? As I said to you, this is really a board discussion. However, we do welcome some of your commentary because we know how important this is to listen and learn and hear you. But I will say that we really need to start asking questions amongst the board members so that they have a handle as how we're going to proceed forward with this. So I just ask you to bear with us because we've really got we need to get these board members asking these questions. I appreciate you asking questions as well, and I appreciate hearing you. But this conversation needs to happen somehow amongst this group of people, and quite honestly, Robert's Rules of Order demand that it happen that way. I'm going to be very straightforward with you all, just based on how we need to move forward. So I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I really do need to get these board members into this conversation because it's a tough one, as you can see.
I've just been asked to just do a quick on the summary sheet here. Moisture issue, we know that. Mold caused the movement of our students. There's no good, clear understanding as to where the moisture and how come it's coming up into the building. Remediation recommendation as presented, about a $450,000 price tag. There's no assurance this will work because we're not exactly sure why it's getting in, but cautiously confident that we will solve and be able to deal with what's going on. The project, once the funding is secured, probably a 4 to 6 month project. Maybe even a little bit quicker than that, but a 4 to 6 month project. So this is, it's something we can wrap our arms around once there's an appreciation or an understanding or an agreement as far as what our remediation steps are.
Just a follow-on question. Richard, would we have technical expertise to be able to tell us whether step one, and only step one to start in terms of budgeting the expense, makes sense from a technical standpoint? Will we have someone, before we have to make a decision as to whether we're budgeting for $450,000 or we're budgeting for $120,000?
Yes.
Just, we need to really rely on someone who has at least the best technical expertise.
I think what you're saying is we need to have that, so we'll find it and find a way to be able to measure, did it work or did it not, and what are the criteria. We'll find the answer. Jennifer?
So, it is my understanding that we, back end of August or September, agreed on $25,000 for engineering fees. And I understand that at that point, we were really thinking of somebody to design an HVAC system. So, what are we doing with that fee now? Are we getting an engineering report?
He's still concluding the HVAC report based on this remediation criteria. And it's not going to be anywhere near the $25,000 amount. So if we want to bring on a civil engineer, we want to bring on someone else who can bring a more complete palette of expertise, we still have the money within that $25,000.
But who is he? Is that the...
Joe, can you tell me what his name is again? The fellow who's doing the HVAC?
Dan Dukas from Engineering Services of Vermont. He's out of Welcome.
So it is an engineer who specializes in what?
He is doing our HVAC. He's taken all that data that we had from the 90s, and he's using that in the data that we have today, and he's coming up with an HVAC system for us.
And how the building is currently built, and current duct systems, airflow, etc. Because it's not made to have a dehumidification.
And do we, however, need to get a second engineer who can analyze to the outdoor rent issue and the water tables, the gentleman said?
Yes, and I
so
will undertake to
how do
find
we
that person.
expedite that? Because now it's been a month since our last conversation. How do we expedite that to happen?
I will, if someone here has this, and also I can work with Seth, I can work with others to get a recommendation, a couple firms, we'll get them in there tomorrow to talk to us.
I do want to make it known to all of you that local vendors have not come through on bids. They have been asked to look at this project, and they have not come through on bids for us. And that was one of the delays in trying to get all this information here. So if anybody does know of an engineer who has these capabilities, please let Joe and Richard know of who these people are, because we're having trouble finding the people who have the expertise.
And we'll follow through.
And we'll follow, that's the key, is the follow through.
So if there are thoughts on that, we will begin to contact them tomorrow morning if there are recommendations along those lines. Absolutely. Okay. One question?
So all the configurations that you've come up with are being put on hold, I'm assuming, until we get a report from the engineer. Is that right?
Yes, this recommendation, what I've been asked by the board, I'm talking about to bring in more expertise.
I'm talking about school configurations. I'm talking about where we're going with closing the Pomfret School or keeping it open. That can't be a decision made until we know what this civil engineer has to say. Am I right?
We are right on that to a degree. We have statutory reporting requirements as it relates to having a budget put together, warned to our towns, and put out for a vote. So we're pushing hard on two sides. It's burning on both ends. But we should be able to get the information from a civil perspective to inform us as best as we can on this. But we have a hard deadline under the budget. It needs to be completed out to the towns and voted on. We're working against both deadlines.
But you can't make a decision without knowing
You make a decision based on the best information we have, given deadlines that we're forced to.
You don't have
I understand that. I understand that.
If, my feeling is if this were a mold issue, this would be, or a water issue, this would be an easy conversation. The workshop tonight is dealing with class sizes, enrollment numbers, and that's, we could almost approach tonight as if none of these campuses existed. We all just moved here. How are we going to set up a pre-K through 12 system that best serves everybody? So we can go forward with tonight's discussion and not make any decisions, and keep these problems and challenges somewhat isolated, and there's discussion we need to have tonight, so separate from the process.
Thank you. We have one more question.
I'm just curious about the agreement when we consolidated, went as one district, that this Prosper Valley School would be open for 4 years. I thought that was part of the contract, that 4-year guarantee that made us all feel so safe. Is that off the table now, or is it just delayed because of the building issues?
That's still the law. That, exactly as it was written in Act 46 and also in the Articles of Agreement. We've got a curveball of how do we deal with the building while at the same time maintaining the school. And there's nothing about closing the school. This discussion is how do we make the building safe for our children to be in there and for the adults to be in there. So, but no changes as it relates to the statutory requirement. Yes, ma'am.
How are those 4 years counted? Are they counted 1, 2, 3, 4, or 4 years with children in the school and the classes going?
I suggest we park these questions.
Yeah, I think we have to, because
Given Page's comments earlier, given the option before us, I think maybe we just park this conversation.
also that road hasn't, no one's gone down that road.
Oh, so nobody knows. That's the answer. That's fine.
Thank you.
Do you want to take a 5-minute bathroom break, everybody?
So
So here we go. This is how I felt today. During much of this meeting, I actually asked Hvac if he could make me videoing hitting my head against the wall. Because sometimes I do feel like this little boy going, how are we going to do this? It seems an impossibility, but I have always been more hopeful than I have on the opposite side. So I am hopeful that we will come to some conclusion in the best interest of our kids and their education. So we have 3 cornerstones for our work tonight. This is for the board, so I'm having a conversation with them, so I don't mean to be rude to all of you. The 3 cornerstones for our work and our decision-making process tonight is going to be based on educational outcomes for our students, so providing the best education we can to our students. Financial sustainability and fiscal responsibility, taxpayers. Short-term and long-term planning, so we're going to have short-term commitments of a year, and we're going to have long-term commitments of 5 years. That's what's going to go into our discussions tonight. So please keep those 3 cornerstones in your mind as we're discussing options as a board. So what we took away from our meeting a month ago was that the four options didn't necessarily capitalize on the strengths of the individual assets that we have as a district. So we kind of went back to the table and said, okay, what are really important points for us to try to do? And we're not gonna answer everybody's questions, and we're probably not gonna satisfy you 100%. But we took in these considerations as we started discussing it at length. Jennifer, myself, Mary Beth, Richard, Sherry Souza, and Hvac. So we looked at commitment to maintaining existing facilities in each town. That's important. It is important we understand that the school can be the heart of your community. Now, what that looks like may be different than what you imagine it to be. So this is where we have to keep the open mind, okay, and look at things a little bit differently. Sustainability of campus configurations. Can we work within the numbers that we have within these districts? Yes, we would like to go to these districts and build the numbers and get larger and market in our communities and bring people, younger families into our communities so that we don't just have an aging population, but we have a combination of a young population and an aging population. That's really, really important, and we heard that. But we also have to make a commitment to all the elementary students where they have access to a makerspace or an innovation lab. And not every school has that. And we found that that's really important for our 21st learning, for competing in the world, that these kids have access to these makerspaces and innovation labs. So we have to make a commitment to the remediation work at TVVS because it's an asset to us. It's an asset to our overall district and to our total population of students, not just 60 kids in Pomfret. There is a maple sugaring house, there is an observatory, there are playing fields, there is a greenhouse, and there are hiking fields. We have to be able to capitalize on the remediation monies that go into sustaining this campus, but it has to benefit now all of our children. It can't just benefit 60 kids, because then it doesn't make financial sense to do it for 60 kids. It makes financial sense to do it for all of our kids and let them see the benefits of this campus. So we need to start identifying what is going to be the best educational use of Prosper Valley. How do we utilize that? Is it in formation of a nature's classroom, which sets us apart from other public school districts in the state, where other public schools come and seek us out now as a nature's classroom? Is it a 4, 5, and 6 campus with a nature's classroom that combines Reading, West, and TVPS, right? TVPS, Prosper Valley. Does it become an early childhood development campus with a nature's classroom? But we've got to start looking at how do we utilize the campus to the best of our ability for all of our kids to take advantage of it. Okay. So 5-year commitments. These are suggestions. Do not freak out on me right now. This is a conversation for the board to have. Looking at Killington Elementary being a pre-K to 6, Reading Elementary School being a pre-K 3 primary school with a makerspace/STEM lab. Prosper Valley being some sort of educational facility, but we don't know what that is. And then Woodstock Elementary School being a pre-K to 6 elementary school. So these are suggestions that we want to make to this group of people so that we can start the conversation. We have to start somewhere in the conversation. We have to explore the possibilities, but we also have to capitalize on what are schools doing well, how do we get the best education to these kids. That's what we're to do, advocate for the education of our kids. Do I have one more? Okay. So the commitment to all the elementary students having access to a makerspace or innovation lab. Skills are developed in an innovation lab or makerspace are strongly aligned with the outcomes of our drafted portrait of a graduate. Identifying key components for primary and intermediate makerspace and design experiences so that those primary and intermediate campuses get that specialty of those makerspaces built specifically for them and their learning capabilities. Ensuring that all our primary and elementary schools have access to these key components and licensed teachers. That's how we feel that getting more equity into the classroom, into the school, will hopefully benefit all of the kids across the district.
Paige, can you back up and just define makerspace?
How do I?
And introduce when this came into the dialogue, because this is the first I've heard this.
That's why we're having this conversation. Some schools have makerspaces or STEM labs, and other schools don't.
So what is a makerspace?
Would you like to elaborate on that?
A makerspace has a number of different components to it, but basically it's helping kids work through a design process and grapple with like abstract problems. One of the things that we had talked about in kind of our tour, talking about Profile of the Graduate, and is this idea of people needing to be able to grapple with unstructured problems. And so in a makerspace, an innovation lab, students are given some type of design challenge where they have to sort out how am I going to approach this? I might make a prototype and I might rethink that prototype. And what we're finding right now is that I think all of our schools, except for Reading, we have a space that's already designated there. Now within the schools they're a little bit different, but this is kind of a real critical piece that as we think about building and helping our students develop those skills that are so critical in terms of 21st century learning, particularly in those design places, you also are doing a lot of collaboration. You're looking at how you're communicating out your findings, so that it's a space that really helps to enable some of the skill set that we talked about in our different workshops around landscape shifts and portrait of graduate.
Okay, I'm going to hand it off to Mary Beth.
Just one of the things that, in reflecting on what Paige was talking about in terms of those cornerstones, one of the cornerstones was educational outcomes for kids. And looking at this proposal that we have for the board's consideration, it does help to balance out class sizes across the district. That's one of the things that we're struggling with right now, is that we have some places that have significantly lower class sizes than others, and we want to try to get those evened out a little bit. We know that grade schools purposely designed for educator collaboration, and when you have multiple sections of a grade level, you have an ability for teachers to do some collaboration with a grade level partner. You also are able to do some strategic development of classes. So when you have students that may, for example, have a conflict with one another, you cannot put them in the same class. You can have a situation where you are building classes that may represent a larger spectrum of learners. You can be thoughtful about fit between a student and a teacher personality type of thing. So it does, when you have the larger, more robust sections of classes, you can do some really strategic development and you can do greater collaboration. I think we have some good collaboration going on right now, but this would enhance our ability to collaborate. In these models, we would get closer to being able to do grade-specific programming. We would be more focused in terms of special education intervention. And Sherry, can you just take a couple minutes to talk about that?
I think the challenges that I face is that I need to staff 5 elementary schools and middle school and high school, and some of those have really different sizes of special ed populations. But I have special ed teachers that are teaching K to 6. And instead of what we can do at the middle school and high school, is that we are grade specific. We have someone 7-8, we have someone 9-10, and someone 11-12. And a number of my elementary special educators are working with kindergartner students all the way up through 6th grade. That's really challenging. And it's expensive to staff.
In this model, we get more students that would have access to reading and math teachers for targeted intervention. We would have more students that would have increased opportunities for counseling and nursing. We would have more students have access to on-site after-school programming, and that all students, as we talked about, kind of what is the potential for Prosper Valley, would have access to some of the outdoor space. Richard?
Oh, yeah.
Did you get a chance to relax?
What numbers? Financial. This is what Jennifer went through and what I commonly call a nut, or what we're walking into the year with contractually. We have about a $685,000 contractual increase that's currently sitting out there. And what that means to us, and again, this is awfully early, the state hasn't given us a lot of their data yet. We don't have equalized pupils, we don't have the yield on the education funds and things that will change. But based on what we know, that $685,000 actually puts us above the penalty threshold as it relates to per student. We already talked about the 2 cents, the reduction of the incentive from 8 to 6. And the unified tax rate increases by about 13 cents, which equates to close to 8%. So that's just a starting point. That's just a challenge. It's not something to be that's meant to scare. It is what it is and what we're working with. On these budget restructure options, and these are the sites that are similar to what we were talking about at the last meeting. But this option with the Reading 5-6 students coming to West and with Prosper Valley continue to be a separate entity but combine grade levels. And then adding a teacher at West to address class size. If this is put into place, we're looking at approximately $147,000 reduction that would take place, made up of a reduction in student positions as well as the reduction in the building expenses at Prosper Valley. In looking at the next option, where you do all of that but integrate Prosper Valley in with West, we're looking at a potential way of offsetting some of that $685 total of $545,000. It's about 10 cents. This is a reduction of 4.8 teacher positions, classroom, specials being language, art, music, etc. Special ed and nurse positions, as well as reduction of administration, principal, and support, and the reduction in the building expenses that would relate to Prosper Valley for this 1 year period. And then the next option, or option 4 as it was called, is that same plus moving also grade 4 from Reading over to West, which ends up a potential savings $658,000. And you can see what the reduction is, 6.6 teacher positions, as well as reduction in the administration and the Prosper Valley school buildings.
I have a hard time understanding the math.
Pardon me?
I just have a hard time understanding the math. Could you explain to me if you're moving a teacher from Reading to West in the first option, how that saves $145,000? We only have 3 teachers, so if you're taking 1 and you're moving them to West when you take 5-6, then we're down to 2. Well, you're not getting rid of 2 teachers if you're leaving pre-K through 3. So where are you getting the 6.6? The math doesn't make sense to me, knowing that we only have 3 teachers now. We only have 3 full-time teachers now. If you take 1 for 5-6, and then you take another one, I don't understand the math.
Yeah, let me add, so that option also includes looking at Prosper Valley, because if you look at...
So the savings is coming from Prosper Valley, not Reading?
There are a number, the primary savings there in the first option, yes, come from the combination of classrooms at Prosper Valley, because we're looking at numbers there. Let me just see if I can pull them up. If we left everything the same, Prosper Valley class sizes would be, we would have 8 students in grade 2, 8 students in grades 4, 9 students in grade 5. So that particular option is talking about doing a combination 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's where the 2 teachers come from. However, if we keep all things the same, we would end up with class sizes of 26 at West in grade 3 through 4, so we'd have to add in a teacher there. To be able to get that back in the round, so those 2 go down to 1. And then when we consolidate pieces of specialists, when we're not offering as many sections, then we can reduce our special subjects by some. So there's the 2 classroom positions actually come from the consolidation of the Prosper Valley School.
So how does...
Can I just ask a look? I mean, here. Can I ask, just so the board can get some work done?
Yeah,
can we just keep it here? I mean, it's a great question,
Okay.
but it is not a community discussion. We
So
just have
this
to be able to get our work done. Thank you.
So this is not an informational meeting for the public to understand the proposal?
It's a board meeting.
The next piece is just quantifying the $450,000 remediation. So we can put it into a number. If it's funded through a bond, an 8-year bond, estimated cost $50,000 a year, principal and interest, so about 1 cent over an 8-year period, so 1 cent each year. If it's done in the budget or in a separate warrant article, basically out of local funds, it comes out to 9 cents is what the cost would be in the 1-year period. And then there's discussion of donation. I don't know where that stands or what it is, but it's another alternative to funding what the improvements would be.
Can you just clarify for us, so in budget / warrant, so budget is if we just put the 450,000 additionally into our budget.
Correct.
And we don't make any offsets for that 450, then it increases the tax rate by another 9 cents.
Correct.
What is it? The warrant is a special,
The warrant, as I see it, and this is we have the budget, which is the budget. A warrant can be an additional spending item that is also voted on. So it's separate from the budget. So the budget can stand on its own merits and be approved or disapproved. And the bond stands on its own merits and can be approved.
The warrant.
But at the end, yes, the warrant, I'm sorry. But if they're both approved, they both come out of the same pool of local dollars. It's just two decisions as opposed to putting the $450,000 directly into the budget. It's just another strategy of giving voters the ability to vote on it separately.
Richard,
That's the whole structure.
Does that hit the penalty? Does infrastructure spending like this or bond?
Should be determined on that, Matt. I think we can build an argument back to the state that should be, that it should have a safe harbor because it's a necessary improvement to one of our buildings that was outside of our control, basically. But we'd have to make that argument.
Say more about donation.
If someone would like to write a $450,000 check and say that this building is...
Is that even in the talks, or are we just putting out a wish list?
It is in the talks, but there's nothing formal in the process of trying to solicit donations. But it has been something that in the course of conversations has been stated and therefore worthy of at least identifying that it might be there. Robert?
Can you go back? I'm not clear on the assumptions for what this means for TPBS. You're talking about a 5-year plan, but this is a 1-year plan, correct? This is next year's fiscal year.
Correct.
Okay.
This is correct.
So under this budget, what are the assumptions for TPBS?
Depending on which one of the options would be that Prosper Valley does not reopen for fiscal 20, that the students of Prosper Valley continue to go for education to West, either as a separate standing, option number 1, separate entity with the combined grade levels, but a separate entity as it's similar to what it is now, or that the classes are integrated in with the West. So both options are there, but both of them are stating that the building is not opening in fiscal 20. That fiscal 20 will be a period of time to understand how to use a building, conclude the remediation, take care of what needs to be done, and the students would be at West for 1 more year. That's what these assumptions are assuming. I mean, that's what these options are assuming.
One of the things I can clarify, Richard, on that is that this one, here, where it's, that it functions as a separate entity, one of the things the board could decide is we're going to vote the funds, move people back, because the staffing would be the same regardless of whether they were at rest. It's basically taking what we have now and moving it back. But you would probably have to pull about 50,000 out of that because you wouldn't get the savings from Prosper Valley expenses. But this is basically keeping a staffing of Prosper Valley intact for next year. Is that helpful?
It does. I guess I still want to understand what the assumption is. You're concluding that as a result of the need for additional time well into next school year for the remediation is the reason that these two options would be considered under budget assumptions. Is that right?
Right. Well, part of what we need from the board is we need you to tell us what assumptions do you want when we build the budget.
Right, I'm trying to understand what you're putting out in terms of
so there
ideas.
are the ideas that we're throwing out is, the one thing you can do is just keep it the same, but there's nothing that would be impacted in terms of the budget. You could move 5-6 to West, keep Prosper Valley as a separate entity, either at West, if the building can't open and we can't figure out how we're going to use it and we can't get the funding in advance, you could keep it right now pretty much as it is, combining those classes that are so low. Or if we were able to figure out, okay, this is how we're going to use the building, this is the funding source, if we could get all that done at the start of the school year, you could just pop back into Prosper Valley. So you could do either with this option. Or this one is really looking at, okay, we're making the assumption we're going to take the extra year. And one of the things that I think we've heard from a lot of different places is that running it the way it currently is with like a school within a school doesn't make a lot of sense. So for next year, we would actually integrate them in. And so if we do something like that, we are able to merge classes together and get more efficiency in our special subjects. We actually go down to special education teacher, we go down in nursing. We actually can start looking at reduction in administration position. And then if under this scenario, Prosper Valley doesn't close, there's some savings in terms of building expenses. So if we do all those things for fiscal year 20, then we're at about 545 in terms of savings. And then if you bring fourth grade over from Reading as well, then you're up at about 650. And so any of those things are possible. One of the things that I think that we're challenged by is we know we need to get going in budget development, but we need you to tell us what assumptions do you want us to make as we start to build the budget. Did that help clarify?
Yes, just one additional question. Richard, you said full remediation 4 to 6 months.
Yeah.
So that I think we got clarification in a previous meeting that it's possible once taxpayers have approved the expenditure, whether that comes from the budget on town meeting or whether it comes in a warrant or a bond issue approval, there's the ability to begin to expend those dollars. You don't have to wait until July 1 to do budget year.
We have to wait till July 1 to expend the dollars that are approved.
You do not.
We do.
That's different information than was put out last time.
Budget is for a specific period of time, and the voters are approving a budget from July 1st, 19 to June 30th, 20. What we have done on July 1st is to tax anticipation notes or something like that in expectation of the tax dollars coming in. But the dollars have to be spent in the period of time that the voters actually approve them to be spent. So we already have our budget through June 30th, 19. This is the budget from July 1st on. That's not bond. Bond is a different story. Bond, if approved, can start that process immediately. That's not driven by fiscal year.
Okay. Well, obviously, I was thinking if it's approved in March, then we're pretty close. If all went to plan for a full remediation, if we end up doing something based on an engineer's recommendation, something less than that, we would have time to be in a position potentially to have the school in place if all went well. I mean, no one knows by September. If it's a bond issue, but not if it's in the budget.
The budget dollars for fiscal 20 have to be spent in fiscal 20. They can't be spent before, and for that matter, they can't be spent after. They have that finite period of time that they can be spent on that.
To follow up on that, wasn't that brought up in the context that if contractors knew that that money was budgeted for July 1st forward, that you would sometimes get people who would start the work knowing that the money would become available July 1st? Wasn't that
Maybe that was it.
That was the discussion that we had, and the select board members from Pomfret said that they do business like that all the time, that money, that you could get people to start the work on the goodwill, understanding that the money is budgeted and would be paid July 1st after, because that's how business has to be done based on how budgets are done.
I haven't gone down that path, but it's a reasonable request.
And they were not sure if that's different for a school decision versus a town decision. But that might be something worth knowing, because then we could do the remediation earlier if that money was allocated starting July.
And someone was willing to fund the project and receive payment.
So if I could just package the decisions that we're kind of going to be forced to make eventually on this proposal. I guess one is, how do we deal with very small campuses and this idea of a pre-K through 3 campus configuration structure? So that's kind of one decision, right? So which is effectively the ready decision. I guess I'd package the second one of it on Prosper Valley is kind of, in the first instance, how much runway do we give ourselves to make a decision on investing in the building and how we configure that building? So that's kind of like, do we put in the budget this year? Do we do a bond this year? What do we ask the voters for in March? And what is the timeline that we kind of put out for reusing that building? And then I think the third decision is, how do we think about the Prosper Valley students in that context? So do we do with the idea that they're going back into the Prosper School, right, which is kind of presaging what the idea is for Prosper Valley? Do we do it just kind of parking them for a year like they are in the Howland West with a separate structure, right? Or do we do an integration between West and Prosper Valley in the interim before we figure out the final structure? Is that a fair way of?
I think that captures it, yeah. And, those are the thoughts that we're putting forward to the board. I mean, you may have some other thoughts about how to do it, but those are the ones as we've kind of looked at numbers and class sizes that seem to make the most sense.
Richard, just to get some more clarity around the bond issue versus a warrant. So if we put it out as a bond, it goes to a bond to all towns?
Correct. It's a bond for the school district.
For the school district.
Not unlike the one we currently are paying for in the high school. It's covered by others.
Okay. And it has to, it would have to get a majority of votes
I believe it's
from
just
all
a
towns?
simple majority.
Simple majority.
In our current budget, do we have the funding to do the 40, or what was your initial cost of doing the initial grading and
80,000.
And then the testing.
do we have the monies in the current budget to get the process going or not?
It would require a trade-off, but I could come forward and work with management and with the management team, with with the administration team, sorry, old habits. And we'll come up with a recommendation. To come up with the money would mean this, and we could absolutely bring something forward.
Can I ask another question just on Prosper? So I think we're going to get into it, which is there's probably a variety of really interesting things that we thought about Prosper as an asset for the entire district that we could consider, right? But where are the decision points on the investment into Prosper that we would need to make, depending on what we decided to do with Prosper? So, for example, can we do 90% of the work no matter what the final outcome of Prosper is, or do we have to kind of decide? I just don't know when we have to decide on Prosper, and then when we have to phase the work in behind that, right? I mean, I guess I would say the feeling I had is we all kind of know it's an awesome asset. We're going to invest in it. We're going to fix it. What we do with the building is the open question. So knowing that, it seems like we should probably start work sooner rather than later. But I don't know what decisions we need to make before that.
I think the conversations at the table should be kind of looking at your options where do we delay the process of construction and putting kids back in the school for a year so that we can really think thoroughly through what is that campus and how does that asset work for all district-wide kids. So is it something that becomes a 4, 5, and 6 for West, Reading, and Prosper because it lends itself to an older campus, whereas Woodstock may become a primary campus because it lends itself more towards a primary campus. And then you have Nature's Classroom on top of it. Or do we do something where we try to remediate the first phase, do the testing, from now, say we want to find the monies of that $80,000, do the first phase of everything, reevaluate, and say, now what do we, how do we do this? Does primary go into here? Does nature's go? I don't know what the answer is, but I think we've got to have that discussion, because obviously we want to make a commitment to Prosper Valley as being an asset to our district. It's whether or not you slow down, which has been the request of a lot of people, and take the opportunities to really digest what can that campus offer to us long term. So it's not just a short-term fix. It's a long-term commitment. That's hard though, because you also want to start making some structural corrections to the building at the same time. You don't want it to just sit there. You don't want it just to sit there. You want to start making the corrections now. But I think we have to have the understanding that just because we maybe make the commitment now to start making those corrections, that it's not necessarily a guarantee that students go in there in September. That's the we have to discuss those nuances of it, and how does that affect the entire district and all the kids? Because is it just a year fix where you put all the Prosper Valley kids in, and then you once again we're back at this table going, so what do we really want to do with Prosper Valley? It's just goddamn tricky.
It's a bit of a gamble, because if we don't get the Prosper kids back by September, I guarantee you we won't have the numbers that justify it operating as an elementary school by the following September. Now, looking at the trends and looking at the numbers, I don't know if kids are moving into Pomfret and Bridgewater. We don't want to take kids from Reading and Barnard. We want kids from outside coming in to the district. So that's the gamble that we have to roll the dice on. Do we build it as an elementary school, and that drives the timeline? It's got to be next September. Or do we take the call now, start investing in it, keep it a viable building, but start looking at for what it is? I don't know how to roll that dice.
I guess I think there's just, like we're already, I don't know if you know this slide we had at the very beginning of the year, it's been a rock and a hard place. I mean, we have an 8% momentum case scenario, do nothing, right? That is before any kind of work done on infrastructure. To say nothing of the middle school, high school, right? To say nothing. So, and that's probably going to repeat again next year, right? Just because that's the way the trend lines are going. So I think the more that we can restructure for the long term now, just knowing where the trend lines have been going, well, at least, I think they're going to be hard decisions no matter what. I think what kills us, and what has been killing us over the past 20 years, has been just a drip, 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 and like the little paper cups each time. I'd rather make some bigger structural moves that allow us to invest for the long term.
So I have two questions.
Yeah.
First, being new to the board, I think I need a better understanding of the process of where are these options coming from? Who's coming up with these options? So one of my questions I raised to the board by email was, so there was a whole list of brainstorming that's come from the community, it's come from faculty, but we keep coming back to these 4 options. So, and it feels like that's all we have to vote on. So where are the other options? And what's the process of, how do we decide what's viable versus what's not?
So when our teachers met, we did some brainstorming about what are the opportunities and our challenges, and thinking big picture. So things like, what could be possible with Prosper Valley and, all of our different campuses. That was one conversation. This is a short-term conversation. We have, and the budget process is tight, really, really tight. And the board has some very quick decisions that it needs to make in order to give us guidance so that we can build the budget. And within that is what are the campus configurations going to look like for next year. So it doesn't give us enough time to start talking as communities about what's possible here, what's possible there. We need to know what is staffing going to look like for next year in our schools in order to build a budget. And then the other piece of it that was time sensitive for the board is last spring, we had recommended moving grade 6 out of Reading, and the community felt that they did not have enough time in April to process that. So the board said, we will wait, and if we're going to make any changes, we will do it in the fall to give families plenty of time. So the board is looking at different issues than like the teacher pieces, because those are long-term possibilities for our communities. The board is sitting with two very short-term issues. What is the direction around tax rate that gets tied up into what are the grade level configurations? Are you going to open up are you going to keep Prosper Valley where it is? Are you going to keep Reading the way it is? And what do you want to do about building monies in for remediation at Prosper Valley? So those are the shorter term issues that the board is dealing with, and we have to tease those two out. What you were provided with at the last board meeting was a full list of the kind of ideas that people have that could be possible long term. But none of those can get processed quickly enough to answer these questions about the budget.
So, I mean, my thoughts are, the irony was that last spring, it felt very last minute, we needed to make a decision about moving the grades. And the board listened to that and, postponed that and said, well, wait, we'll have more time. Now this is coming up again, but it's the same issue of we don't have enough time, make a decision now. And I think you're hearing that from the community. I'm hearing very loud from my community, I hope you are too, Tim, that it doesn't feel like there's still any engagement of where is the collaboration, the community brainstorming of that versus here's the options. And that's what's really frustrating for me as a board member right now is it doesn't feel like there's any collaboration in this process or engagement. It's here are your options and let's vote on that. Versus I need some more understanding of where are we getting this information from? Where's the brainstorming that engages us as a board?
Well, I think this is it. I mean, so every option should be on the table, right? And so, like, let's put it out there. Like,
but excuse me, every option isn't on the table.
No, I mean,
that's the frustration.
So what I'm saying is, like, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, like, status quo is definitely an option, right? And so, like, I think we can make that decision as a board. Like, we can make different decisions. So I guess I would love to have you inject your thoughts on what should be different, right? I wouldn't say this is the total where we're going to end up, right? This is the starting position.
So I feel like this conversation tonight keeps on looping around to Prosper Valley, but it's loud from the crowd. And Justin pointed out, I think it's two different things, and I think that we could discuss, the one topic is, are we going to move forward with something? We're not making any of these decisions tonight. We're trying to give administration some guidance as to what we want. I think the one thing that I feel anyway, the conversation has forgotten is that we want an engineer to give some advice on this situation. And because we're not making any decisions tonight, I think we really, in my opinion, would want to hear from an engineer. Because if the answer is those first options 1 and 2, they believe they'll take care of it. And that might change our conversation for our actual meeting here in a couple weeks. But we don't have that information yet. So I think engineer is a big step for that. And then I think that within our group so far, it seems like there's a lot of consensus that in some capacity, no matter what else is discussed, the building is probably going to want to be salvaged. So potentially doing the drains and stuff is going to happen anyway. So, maybe next meeting here in a couple weeks, we talk about that no matter what, right? Because we could potentially roll that into a budget. But tonight's meeting, we're supposed to be talking about academic outcomes and kind of what enrollment means in each class for the different campuses. And I feel like we haven't even barely touched on that yet. That's not what our conversation is, because we keep going back to that. And I think that's would hopefully get to some of what you're talking about, Adam, is if we talk about what this would mean for each school by moving kids around and we have the numbers in front of us and continue that conversation, then hopefully we get somewhere with whether we think kids need to move campus to campus or not. But I think the assumption that the building in Prosper Valley is going to be there should be the assumption for the purposes of this meeting. So I guess just echoing that comment from earlier.
Can I say something? I think, Adam, I understand your frustration. I think it's hard sometimes to sit here and wonder
we are not supposed to be making these decisions, but we're supposed to be making decisions on the decisions that we entrusted the people who are supposed to be the professionals in their field to bring the recommendations to us. And so sometimes we might question those, and it is our responsibility to question those. But if we were to sit here and have to ruminate through all of those, curriculum, budgets, strategy, we don't wear those hats. We don't.
Absolutely,
So
I'm not signing up for that,
Right.
signing up for that position, but it's more of, I want to understand the process. If I'm asking to weigh in on something, I want to understand the process of which I'm weighing in, and where that data is coming from, where that research is coming from.
So then maybe sitting in on some of those admin meetings would help understand the process. I don't know, but to make it more transparent.
And, and one of the things that we look at is class sizes and where we can potentially do some combinations where it helps us to have reason. We talked at last meeting, like kind of the range of class sizes. So where are we off? Where are we on the high side? What would that take to adjust those particular pieces? What groups of kids travel well together in terms of curriculum, like primary versus intermediate? And so we're looking at then those questions of can we get like grade levels together for increased collaboration? What do the schools offer for different students? So there's a whole bunch of factors that go into that. And Adam, I would offer, I can appreciate your frustration around we would like nothing more to spend the next 4 months talking about this and trying to have deep discussions with communities. We are in a situation where we need an answer in order to build the budget. And Richard and Jennifer went through a timeline. We've got to get a budget out to the communities for them to vote on. And so we need direction around what's tolerable in terms of the tax rate. What are our communities going to bear? Because one of the things that I think can be really disruptive to our educational program is if we don't pass the budget in March, then we are in chaos. And not in chaos, but it's very complex, and all our time and energy goes there instead of trying to figure out strong academic programs for kids. And so, and I can, your feeling of that it feels like it's so fast, that resonates with me, and I understand that, and it is really fast, and I wish it were different. But we are facing a very real situation that we have to build a budget under incredibly complex and emotional situation, and we are absolutely going to need for you to give us direction on that November meeting. Direction around tax rate, direction around how you want to fund. If you want to fund Prosper Valley, what's the configuration, because they have significant impacts on what that budget will look like. So your concerns resonate with me, and I wish it were different, but that's the reality that we're seeing.
The big part of it too is we have $600,000+ of expenses that we can't control.
685.
685. So I mean, we're going to have to find a way to overcome that challenge and to get the academics to where they need to be.
And I would just offer for Woodstock, we had for the town of Woodstock, not the school district, but the town of Woodstock, we had a 2-cent increase proposed in our budget last year. Got voted down, right? And so it only took one voice in town meeting to get that to happen, right? So I would just say like a 10-cent increase is a big, which is a limited case scenario, is a big increase. So I think we need to do something to kind of bring that down, or we might face a situation where we don't pass budget.
So are you actually asking us for ideas for how we think this should be reconfigured?
I would like to just break down into these small groups right now and start discussing what you think are viable options. And I'm going to lead you in some of these conversations, looking at primary schools versus secondary schools or intermediate schools, okay? These are the things I'm going to put on the table for you. I'm not going to give you 4 options. I'm going to give you things to think about in your conversation. Primary school versus a secondary school.
capitalizing on the assets of each campus. How do we get a little bit more equity? And when I talk about equity into the schools, I'm not talking pre-K to 6. I'm talking about how do we get more equity into the schools so that there are maker spaces in every school, so that we can focus on reading, writing, and mathematics and have those math and English interventionists where they need to be, so that the kids across the district gets what they need. So that we consider, do we hold off on Prosper Valley for 1 year or don't we? And we have to make that decision. It's a hard decision. And if we do make the decision that we don't hold off, do we say, okay, here are the parameters. We're going to put the $80,000 into this first step, but we are going to decide that it is a primary school only for the first year. And then the rest of the school is going to be decided on what the rest of that school is going to be. We have to look at all of these options, and we have to, as a board, come up with some kind of guidance for Richard and Mary Beth and the Finance Committee to move forward in preparing a fiscally responsible and sustainable, so that we're not here at the table, keep changing our mind year after year after year. Because I don't know about you guys, but right now my glass is half empty. And I don't like that feeling. It's not a good feeling. And you all know me from my own school experience at West and from the middle school, high school. And I am a mama bear when it comes to our schools. And right now, I want to fight for every single one of our schools as best as I possibly can. And yes, this is a fast-moving target. And it sucks that the state requires us to do what we're doing right now, because to be quite honest, sometimes I wonder why we voted for Act 46. You know? We're in it. And so somehow or another, we have to figure it out together. And I mean, you can see me. I'm at wit's end. I'm emotional. I mean, I read that letter to you because I meant what I was saying. I get the importance of having schools in each district. It's really important. Our littles shouldn't be on a bus at 6:30 in the morning. It's just not responsible for us. But at the same time, we have to somehow think a little bit differently, or else we're not going to be able to give the tax incentives also to our taxpayers. And I'm sorry, if you think people are leaving the state of Vermont now, they're not even going to be able to stay here for the next 10 years because they won't be able to afford it. And you will see more and more second and third homeowners like I have on both sides of me right now, who I never see. So somehow we have to figure this out. And it's not going to be a winner-loser situation. It's going to be the kids who are the winners. And we have to start thinking about the kids being the winners. And stop talking about us feeling anxious and mad and angry and ready to tear somebody's head off, because we are getting further and further away from our conversation, which is about educating our children. We have to start talking about that somehow or another. So let's break down into tables. I want you to start talking about things. I apologize to all of you for my emotion, but let's get it done.